Welcome back, everyone, to my channel. I'm CicelyRenee, and I'm super excited that you're here. We are diving into the Bible. We're reading it in 52 weeks, and here I'm doing recaps of chunks of chapters that we're reading. And so if you want to join us, be my guest, please come hang out. And it doesn't matter if you're behind, it is okay. You can start where we are at and continue your journey after us, right? And so I absolutely love it because we have a group of women who are holding each other accountable, checking in on them, and we're discussing these things, and it's just so powerful. And so I thought I would make these recap videos to help me remember what was said. I write down my notes, but I also, repetition is one of the best teachers, right? So when you hear it multiple times, when you say it out loud, when you're reading, when you're writing, it helps you really take in whatever you're reading, really internalize it, right? So that it can become part of your, your mental, your emotional, your spiritual life. And so if you are having a hard time studying the Word, just stay with me. Keep hanging out with me. We will talk about how to do Bible studies and so many other things, okay? And so I hope you subscribe, and let's dive in. So real quick, I'm gonna let you know that I'm putting 2 days in one. So this is chapters, I believe, 8 through 15, okay? And so I did it that way because a chunk of those chapters were all about the plagues. And so I figured I don't have to describe every single plague that happened, but just kind of give you an overview. And so if you want, go ahead and grab your Bibles, get your notebook, and, start reading it for yourself, take notes, and then also share your thoughts in the comments below, okay? And so let's get this party started. So in the previous chapters, we learned that, Pharaoh has a hardened heart, and God just allowed him to really do what he wanted to do because he already was in a bad place, right? He did not want these people to prosper. He wanted to use them and manipulate them and do whatever he wanted to do so that he can get whatever he wanted, right? They were slaves. And so he didn't want to free these slaves. And so God just continued to allow him to have a hardened heart. And so the next couple of chapters are talking about the plagues. One of the things that I found out was that these plagues were in threes. So there were about 9 plagues or more. There's 10 plagues, but the first 9 were in sets of 3. And so the first 2, plagues, they had warnings. And then the third plague, there was no warning. So in the first 2, God is like, I'm giving you mercy. I'm telling you what's going to happen. You have an option to, do what I'm asking you to do, or this is going to happen to you. And so God did it in rounds of 3. And so, let me read those plagues. So the first one was a blood river, right? So the river turned into blood. And I believe that was in chapter 7. The next one was frogs. And so we have these frogs, which were considered, sacred, and they were not supposed to be killed. They represented a female goddess, right? And so God was plaguing them with things that they worshiped. And one thing about the frogs is like, oh my gosh, there's so many of them, we have to kill them. So he's kind of like messing with them, like, this is your God, this is what you want to worship. And I just thought that was wild. The next one was lice, and that was no, warning. They just had lice all over it. And one of the things that you need to understand about the Egyptians is that they idolized cleanliness, right? That cleanliness was their top tier. They wanted to be clean. They wanted to be, just clean, right? And so in order for them to worship their gods, they had to be clean. And so having this lice, that takes down their cleanliness, right? And they're not able to go worship because, God plagued them with this lice. And that's in a couple of them too. So like you have these flies, you have the livestock, the boils. And so, this cleanliness is being attacked. God is like, you're tripping, you're worshiping other gods before me, and this is not how it's supposed to work. So remember, Moses, or, the plagues would happen, and then Pharaoh would be like, I can do that too with my magicians. But we see here that, Satan's power is very limited. He cannot do everything that God does. And, I'm like, why aren't you guys seeing this? Like my whole heart is just like, how do you not believe that there's a God and he's doing all these things? And I'm just like, okay. And so Pharaoh's like dealing with all these plagues, and he's like, Moses, please tell God to remove these things and I'll let your people go. But Pharaoh, he has a hardened heart. He really don't want to let the people go. And so he's like, I just want to do what I can do right now just to have some relief. So that was something that you should pay attention to as well. So in chapter 9, we have the plagues against the livestock. And God is showing Pharaoh that these plagues are attacking only the Egyptians and not the Israelites. And so the Israelites are spared from all of this that's happening. The next plague was about the boils, and there was no warning for that one at all. So then there's hail, but the cool thing about it, it is mixed with fire. So it's like, how can fire and ice be in the same environment, right? One will have to disappear, right? So if you're putting ice on fire, the fire goes out, right? If you put fire on ice, the ice melts. And so just seeing how God is using two opposite things that can do, destroy one or the other, but it's staying together was like mind-blowing. And then also they're in Egypt, so they have never experienced hail, and so they're just like, what is happening? What is all this coming down on our land? And so there's just so much happening, and Pharaoh keeps saying, please have him remove it, I'll let your people go. And then all of a sudden Pharaoh's like, yeah, I was just kidding. So one of the key points to remember in these couple of chapters, 8 and 9, is that, God is giving Pharaoh enough time to repent, right? But Pharaoh's just like, he's fake repenting. And when you are repenting, you have to have like a huge change of heart and quit doing what you were doing. And so Pharaoh's just doing enough to, kind of like pacify, but he's not pacifying anybody but himself and his Egyptian people, because he definitely ain't pacifying God. God knows his heart. So I'm reminded that people usually do things, in response to calamity and craziness and just chaos. And so they only do it as a reaction to what's happening. And then they go back and revert to their old ways because they stopped experiencing that, and then they're like, okay, well then I might as well go back as well. And so that's, you got to be careful with that. So in chapter 10, we have, God doing these, plagues so that he can get all the glory, right? So he wants to show these people that he is the one and only true living God. But Pharaoh's still like, yeah, nope, I'm God. And I'm just like, bro, really? So the Egyptians they're getting fed up. They're like, Pharaoh, yo, let these people go. Like, we are suffering, we are struggling. And I just thought of this. I'm like, how can you have a leader in charge and not that he cares more about his ego than his people? Because he's like, his people are suffering because of what he is doing. And I'm just like, that is not a leader at all. So now we have, the death of the firstborn. So God is talking to Moses, telling him what's going to happen. And this is the firstborn of, the people and the animals. And so there's this thing called the Passover. And this is when you can come into agreement and start believing in God by your actions, right? So like God is like this, he's like, okay, I'm still giving you an opportunity to repent and come to me. I'm giving you this time. And so they still could have done this, but they did not. The Egyptians, right? The Israelites definitely are listening. So how it works is, you get an unblemished, lamb. You live with them for like 4 days, and then you roast them. And so there are some key things that really blew my mind. And this is why, reading the Bible, but then you're going to have to read it multiple times to know what is being referred to, right? And so I started reading, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John months ago. And so now I'm like I went back to the beginning, so Genesis, Exodus, and I'm seeing all these, like, the Bible's like interwoven, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, okay. So we have the lamb, right? The unblemished lamb that becomes really close to the family. And so now it's being sacrificed. Something precious is being sacrificed, right? And so what's going to happen is that these people have to eat the whole entire lamb. They cannot break the bones. It has to be roasted. There's stipulations, right? And it represented Jesus on the cross, right? So Jesus was the lamb, the unblemished lamb that had to suffer, right? And one of the things is, like, you know, he did not have any bones broken, but the other two on the cross, their bones were broken. But this precious lamb's bones were not. And so it's, you know, this is what's going to happen. And so when you're eating all of this, you know, all the lamb, this is representation of, you have to eat all of Jesus. You have to take it all. You can't just take bits and pieces or choose what you want. You have to take it all, right? And with that sacrifice, you use the blood and you put it on the doorposts on the left, the right, and the top. And I found out that it looks like a cross when you see it. And so I was just like, I had to go Google some photos, because I'm like, it kind of looks more of like a, like, I'm like, I don't see a cross, but it is. And so I can post a photo here. And so the next thing, we're like in chapter 13. And so the first thing is, like, God is saying, you need to consecrate all your firstborn males, right? And so this just means that he wants them. Like, you have to dedicate this firstborn male to God. You want to consider this child God's. And so then we also have, 7 days of unleavened bread. And so when you have leaven, that's considered, sin and puffiness and haughtiness, right? And so we want none of that. We want just plain, bread that represents who we are as well. So we are not to be puffed up. We are not to be haughty and, think of ourselves better than others. And so as they're leaving, so as they start leaving, they grab Joseph's bones, and this was his faith. He's been in this casket for over 400 years, knowing that God is going to deliver them. So as they're going on their journey, leaving Egypt and going to the next place, which is Mount Sinai, but of course we know that there's gonna be a huge chunk of time before they even reach that land. And so they're traveling, and they're not going the quickest route. They're not taking it easy. God is taking them the safest way, though. So I was just like, okay, God, you have to trust his will. Like, you think things are a little crazy. Like, God, why would you do it like this? Why would you would question him, but God he sees all and knows all. And so he is protecting you. He's providing, guidance so that you are protected. And I just absolutely love the fact that God is showing them that he is with them. So then we have the pillar of cloud by day, and then we have the pillar of fire at night, and it's following them, right? And I'm just like, wow. They had so much, like, closeness. They could see it. God is just like, I'm here with you. Here is your sign, if you will. So the next one, so now we're in chapter 14, and I'm just like, this one is really cool, because all of a sudden Moses is told by God to go back and forth and look like you guys are confused. And so people are noticing this, and the Egyptians notice this, and he's like, you know what? They're confused. Let's go get them. They don't know where they're going. They're probably trapped there. They need my help. And so, Pharaoh is like, let's go pursue them. And so God still, he hardened Pharaoh's heart so that he can go and pursue them. Because, like, God is like a God. He's orchestrated this thing so beautifully and brilliantly. I'm just like, man, my mind would be blown. And just I don't know what it would have been like in that moment, like the suffering, the struggling, having to travel by foot, having your family walking and not knowing what's going to happen. Like, I have no idea what it felt like, but I have an inkling of an idea, thinking that, it's not easy. So the Israelites are just like, oh my God, what have you done to us, Moses? Like, we'd rather have served in Egypt than die in the wilderness. And I love what Moses says next, because he wasn't prompted by God to speak this. And so this is his character, his heart. And he's telling them, do not be afraid, stand still, stand firm in God. God's going to fight for us. And so I like that, because what's going to happen, my next favorite part in this, Moses is crying out to God saying, what's going to happen? And God is like, why are you crying out to me? And move. So it's just like, so standing still doesn't necessarily mean do not move, do not just sit and hide or run or whatever. It is more of like standing firm in faith, standing firm in God, and knowing that he's going to deliver you and carry you and do what he needs to do to protect you, because you are his people. So now they're going, and now all of a sudden the Egyptians are close behind, they have to move forward, but there's nothing but water in front of them. And that can be like, what's next? Like, I don't know how I would have responded, because I'm like, I can't swim, God. And if I could swim, I probably don't have enough stamina to get to the other side. So what's going to happen? What's going to happen? And so one really cool thing that I just had this mind-blowing thought was that God placed, he went before them and behind them, right? So that he placed this cloud in between them, right? And the same cloud had two different effects for the people. This one cloud was darkness for the Egyptians, and that one cloud was light for the Israelites. And I'm just like, God can use one thing and it can mean darkness and horrible stuff for people who are not believers, and it can be light and life for those who are believers. And I'm just like, the first thing that popped into my mind was the Bible. And so I've been reading or seeing a lot of videos where people are like, how can you read the Bible? Is this, that, the other? And so those are the haters. Those are the non-believers. And so for the believers, we're like, what? No, this is life. This is light. And so God can use one thing, but it can be totally different for different people because of their unbelief and their belief. So this was my recap. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I want to know your thoughts over these chapters. There is so much more that I could touch on and talk about, but I don't want to have a long video either. And so I want to hear what your thoughts are. So go ahead and put those in the comments below. And again, join me in the Facebook group. Join us on Tuesday evenings to discuss these chapters in a group of women who, love God and are after his heart and just want to live a life that is, all about God. And so I'm looking forward to seeing you and having you. Peace and blessings.